Welcome to the Electrical Contractor TED Magazine Anti-Electrical Product Counterfeit Initiative. This is the first installment and really essentially the kickoff to an ongoing initiative that we believe is going to be a good long-term process for the entire industry. It is a threat that involves loss of a lot of money for manufacturers, electrical contractors, distributors, a loss of image, certainly a loss of revenue, but probably the most important aspect of this initiative and why it must be stopped, it's costing lives. And for those of you who are electrical contractors out there, as I say, this is the beginning installment. We'll be following up with a jointly produced 64 to 80 page supplement in the December issues of both TED Magazine and Electrical Contractor. It's going to be produced and written by some of the leading experts in our industry, covering a broad range of topics, far more broad than we can cover today. What we would like to talk with you today is to introduce you to the scope and the size of this issue. First of all, as I mentioned, this is costing lives. So safety issues are probably the most important concern that we have. Second is liability to all parties, including electrical contractors. Third, there's no doubt that it's a drain on our economy, and anybody who looked at the market today, I'm not sure we need a further drain. We've got that happening. So, worker safety, end users, bottom line, the very real liability and issues. What we have done is assemble a unique combination of manufacturers, suppliers across all the channels of this industry, of distributors, legal talent, along with a growing list of industry associations, testing organizations, and sponsors. You see some signs behind me. We are so proud and happy that several, actually 9 corporations have stepped forward at this early date. We believe that there will be a substantial number in addition to that. But I would like to offer special thanks to our sponsors at the platinum level who have led the way. Siemens Energy and Automation Division out of Atlanta, Schneider Electric Square D out of Palatine, Nashville, Lexington, points east and west. Our gold standard, our gold sponsors, of which there are 4, Graybar Electric, Alcan Cable, Fluke, and Eaton Cutler Hammer. Our silver sponsors thus far, GE Consumer Industrial, Southwire, and NSI. So we thank them for the support, because without them it can't happen. We have sponsoring associations. That is a growing list: NEMA, NECA, NAD, UL, and we have others on the way. Today all we've done, which we are very proud to say that we have done, is assemble a panel of 4 experts, each offering different insight to help you better understand the breadth of this issue, the depth of this issue, and most importantly, what it means to you. Because you absolutely, as they say, positively, are involved in all of these areas. That includes liability, and that may get your attention. So I'd like to introduce a panel, and then I'm going to sit down and be quiet. In order they're going to be speaking, first is Kevin Yates, who is Vice President of the Siemens Energy and Automation Residential Division, one of our platinum sponsors. Next to him is Steve Litchfield, who is Assistant General Counsel for Schneider Electric Square D, who has been active, he'll be talking about, has actively litigated successfully in this market. I would like to introduce Bob Crane, who is a lead enforcement specialist for Underwriters Laboratory, who again will offer from their point of view. And our anchor guy is Bill Ferguson, who's Vice President Administration, General Counsel, and Secretary of Babcock Power. And for those of you contractors out here, before Bill got thoroughly involved in all of this. He worked for Raytheon Engineers and Construction in our industry. He's a writer and an author. He's actually written for several of our magazines. So without further ado, I'd like to have Kevin, if you'll kind of get it started.
All right, good afternoon. It's certainly a pleasure to get a few minutes of your time today to talk to you about what we see at Siemens as a very significant and growing issue in our industry. You don't have to read too many newspapers or magazine articles before you can find in the consumer markets issues where counterfeit product and imitations have made their way into our marketplace. It is very much a growing issue for our electrical industry, and I just want to share a few thoughts today from a manufacturing perspective on the counterfeiting issue. You know, as technology advances in our industry, and you see the development of things like combination arc fault circuit breakers, where you are providing the consumer and the general public a much higher level of safety, it's going to make the value proposition for those people that would otherwise want to counterfeit, it's going to create an even higher value proposition for them to knock off product. And so it is a growing issue and a growing industry problem. We do not see this as a problem for manufacturers. We do not see it as a problem for distributors or a problem for contractors. We at Siemens view this as an industry problem, and collectively, that's how we have to attack the issue. You know, why is it important? John touched on it just a moment ago. First and foremost, it's a tremendous safety issue. If we have products that are entering into our market that do not fit the form and function they're designed to, people are going to get hurt or even lose their lives, and you're going to have significant damage to property. In addition to that, as John just mentioned, it's a $250 billion issue for our country. In the United States, it's estimated that about $250 billion of revenue is lost in this country alone due to counterfeit product. Globally, we estimate that that's about a $500 billion problem. So you can see that first and foremost, it's a safety issue, but also a significant revenue drain. But what does this mean for you, the electrical contractor? You know, the closer that you are to the end of the supply chain, the more liability you have. So the electrical contractor actually has the highest level of liability in the supply chain from a counterfeit product. If you choose to install a product that is not genuine and a product that is counterfeit, you can be held liable. And you can be held liable for both personal damages in the form of financial retribution, but also imprisonment. There are punishable criminal charges for knowingly violating counterfeit product regulations. Distributors have some liability as well, especially if they knowingly purchase counterfeit product, but the liability doesn't seem to be quite as high, and we have some panel experts here that are going to talk to you in a little bit more detail about that liability. But as a manufacturer, you know, our liability lies with protecting really two important things. One is our customers, and two is our brand. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about, you know, the Siemens approach to how we are trying to protect our customers and trying to protect our brand. You know, first and foremost is education. Part of what we're doing today in this panel discussion is hopefully raising awareness and raising education on the topic. And really, it's the first step. We're just scratching the surface as an industry to raise education. You know, John mentioned a minute ago Platinum membership. You know, Siemens was instrumental in bringing together the groups of TED Magazine and EC and helping to drive forward what I consider to be a very united stand on counterfeiting and education of counterfeiting. You know, we're also working with very reputable organizations such as UL NEMA, groups like that, to educate our government agencies, such as the Port Authority. We, just as recently as a couple months ago, were part of a group that went out to the West Coast and conducted training with Port Authority on how to identify counterfeit product, electrical product coming into the country. And so, from an education and awareness standpoint, we really feel like that's where it starts. Secondly is identification of product. We are working on new and innovative ways to mark our product. We're working with companies that specialize in those different types of areas to help us mark our product so that it can't be replicated and so that you can tell the genuine product from a counterfeit product. Also, we're protecting our intellectual property rights. We are trying to be very aggressive about registering patents, etc., things that would make it that much more difficult for someone to counterfeit our product. Third, we are investigating. We actually have what we're coining the term of secret shoppers out in the market today. We are actively working with our distribution channel partners, trying to uncover and investigate deeply those individuals that might be participating in that illicit behavior. And that gets right into my next point, which is aggressive prosecution. We are aggressively going to go after people as we see them violate and try to knock off our products. We're going to be very aggressive about what we do to bring those folks to justice. We also are working, we have a very strong global network within our own organization, and we share information on a monthly basis about counterfeit activity across the globe. So we're getting reports out of organizations like BEMA and other groups within Siemens and other anti-counterfeiting initiatives across the globe to try to keep tabs and understand what might be entering the U.S. And finally, the last thing that we're doing as an organization is we're actively promoting a reward system that would help bring some reward and recognition to contractors and distributors that actually help us to uncover and find issue. So those are some of the ways that we are, actively trying to attack the counterfeiting issue at Siemens. Again, for us, we see the liability squarely on the shoulders of the contractor and the distributor if they decide to purchase those products. But again, we do see our responsibility as a manufacturer is to protect both our customers and our brand. We're very proud of that brand. We have a strong brand, and we're going to do everything we can to protect that. So what can you do? What can you as a group of contractors do? Well, first and foremost, only buy product from authorized distributors. At Siemens, we have over 4,000 distribution points across the U.S., and that would be the first thing that you could do to take protection for yourself is make sure that you're purchasing product from an authorized distributor. 2, look for warning signs, and I'm going to give you what I consider to be 4 real warning signs that you might have a counterfeit product. Number 1, and probably the most important, is the price. If it seems too good to be true, more than likely it is. And so make sure that, if you think you're getting a great price on a product or you're using the internet to shop, those types of things, you're taking some risk and some liability that you might be in a counterfeiting situation. Interesting statistic from a recent EC survey that was done is that 68% of the respondents to that survey didn't realize that things that were identified as overstock or surplus could easily be counterfeit material. And so that's one way from a price standpoint that you just, it ought to heighten your awareness that you may be buying something that shouldn't be there. Number 2 is product markings. Make sure you look for, as companies go through and mark and identify their product, make sure that you look for those markations. Look for the different certification marks. Look for differences of colors and packaging. Misspelled words. All those things should be indicators that you might not have the authentic, genuine product. Third, the product features. Unusual shapes. You know, what's interesting about that same survey I just mentioned is almost 90% of the respondents in that survey said that they could not tell the difference between a counterfeit product and a real product. Almost 9 out of 10 respondents could not tell the difference between a genuine product and a counterfeit product. So again, look for unusual shapes, missing components, missing feature sets. Those are some indications. And finally, documentation. Products that come without instructions, products that come without warnings, those should be products that trigger some type of awareness that you might be purchasing a counterfeit product. You know, I'm going to leave you with this. The contractor, again, has the most liability. And, you know, what does Siemens stand to lose in the process? Well, Siemens stands to lose brand recognition, and they stand to lose the sale of the genuine product. What you as a contractor community stand to lose is your business, possibly even, you know, some financial ramification or personal prosecution, but most importantly, the consumer stands to lose their house or their life. And so I would say, you have that liability on your shoulders. You now know a little bit about what Siemens' answer is. What is your answer? Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. From a little bit different point of view, Bob Crane's going to talk about some things that Underwriters Laboratory is doing to help contain and control this crime against our industry. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. I want to thank you all first for staying. I would expect and hope that everyone at an electrical convention knows who UL is. You generally refer to us as UL, but we are Underwriters Laboratories. Just a little bit about our background in case some of you are not familiar with us. We are a private, not-for-profit, non-government regulated testing certification laboratory. In addition to testing and certification, we actually also write the safety standards that we do that testing to, and other certification labs will use our standards for the testing. We've been around for over 100 years. We're founded in 1894. We don't manufacture any products like most of the other gentlemen and booths on display here are manufacturers. We don't manufacture a product, but we allow the coveted UL in a circle to be applied to those products that have been submitted to our lab and tested and found to be in compliance with the standards. Basically, we have one purpose, one mission, and that's testing for public safety. With that being said, you can hardly go around without finding a UL on a product that you touch every day. Flip on your television set, make a pot of coffee, flip a light switch, you're touching something that has the UL mark on it. It's estimated that there's about 21 billion, that's billion with a B, billion products every year that have the UL mark applied to them. So there's a lot of products out there. Kevin actually made my presentation a lot shorter because he indicated a lot of things that I would as well. That's a good thing. One of the things that we're doing together is this partnering and partnerships. United we stand, divided we fall against the counterfeiters. Counterfeiters play without any rules. They have the luxury of not having boundaries, not having laws, not having regulations that we have to deal with. So competitor manufacturers and testing certifications alike get together to fight this issue. Kevin threw out some numbers, $250 billion in counterfeit products in the United States. That's a very large number. But in this world today of, a $700 billion bailout for our banks the last couple of days, what does that number really equate to? Well, to put it into another perspective, $250 billion in the U.S. economy is about 7 or 8% of all products that are sold. So imagine that 7 or 8 out of every 100 products sold in the marketplace are counterfeit. Now that's not just electric. That's your counterfeit Louis Vuitton handbags, your Rolex watches, automobile parts, pharmaceuticals, everything that ranges from the luxury and apparel type of counterfeits to the safety and pharmaceutical type. UL has known for a number of years that there's been some counterfeiting of our labels, but the problem never really got to the drastic and dramatic numbers until about 15, maybe 18 years ago, We always had some security features in some of our more prone to be targeted counterfeit products. But with more and more product being manufactured overseas and offshore, the product has escalated. The fact that there's the internet where products can be sold from virtually an unknown location and shipped anywhere in the world. The fact that counterfeiting is a very high profit but low prosecution, low penalty type of crime makes it very attractive for the counterfeiters to get into. What has UL done in the past decade or so? One of the most drastic steps we took was back in 1992, 93, when we developed our first holographic label to be applied to those types of products that we believe the counterfeiters were targeting. We've developed market surveys. Like Kevin said, we go out into the field, we buy products to investigate and find out whether they're legitimate. We do market surveys at the authorized factories that are supposed to be manufacturing products. But it's really too late if we're discovering counterfeit circuit breakers, extension cords, night lights, toasters in your house. It's even too late if we find them in the retail store shelves. So what we've tried to do is take our fight more upstream, finding it earlier. One of the ways we've done that is to develop a relationship with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency over 10 years ago by training and education and arming them with forensic tools to detect counterfeit products coming into the country. We've made a substantial mark against the number of counterfeiters actually entering the country. We've developed, in addition to the holographic label, training programs that we've provided not only to government agencies like United States Patent and Trademark Office, the Department of Justice, and the Chamber of Commerce, but law enforcement. We've taken a very aggressive stand that when we identify and find the counterfeiters, we work with law enforcement, immigration, customs enforcement, law enforcement departments all across the country to actually make buys, undercover buys, and when we find the criminal intent, put these people behind bars. I mean, they are criminals. They are doing things that can burn people's houses down knowingly, cause people to be shocked and or electrocuted. So when we do find the counterfeiters in this country that are importing, distributing, selling the products, we take a very strong approach and work with law enforcement to put them behind bars. We've had some very successful cases where some of the counterfeiters are doing 5, 6, 7 years behind bars and are seeing penalties of $1 million, $2 million, and more. Laws are changing. It was difficult to do this 10 years ago, but fortunately legislation is changing and we're able to more easily get the attention of district attorneys and private investigators to work with us. I'd like to also mention that we have a booth here at the show. If you haven't stopped by it today, it's booth 441. Stop by tomorrow because we do have a number of handouts that talk, again, about some of the things Kevin did, how you as consumers or buyers can spot potentially counterfeit products. Look for the typos, look for boxes that don't contain company names. This is all in some of our pamphlets and brochures. We have some of our newest holographic labels. Every few years we have to improve and provide new technology to the holograms because the counterfeiters, they figure it out after a while, just like they do with currency and money. They see what covert and overt features might be in the label. So we're constantly upgrading and changing our labels. And this year we've actually developed a new gold holographic label that was just introduced June of this year. And it's got some of the most highly technological and advanced covert features. And again, people like law enforcement and customs will use this technology to help spot these products, before they get onto the retail shelves. We work very strongly with agencies all across the world. It's not a problem that's contained in the United States. I don't think I'd surprise anyone if I told you or asked you where you suspected most of the counterfeit products originated from. We find that over 95% of the electrical products that are counterfeit come from China. So again, no surprise there. What are we doing? We're going overseas. We're working with agencies like Interpol, We're working with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police because the counterfeiters have found that they can't always get their product through the U.S. ports, so they may bring them in through Canada and try and get them down through the northern borders or into Mexico or South America and up through our borders. So we work with agencies across the world. Euro Chambers in Brussels, Belgium had a meeting a few months ago that I attended. 1 week from yesterday, Sunday, I'm going over to China. I'm going to be visiting the Canton Fair to try and identify and investigate products over there. We're working with a private investigator, a law firm, trying to take the battle overseas. Lastly, what I'd like to do is just read you an example. I think there's nothing better than a testimonial or a success story. This is an example of a UL client that had their product counterfeited overseas. It's a Japanese company, actually, but this was an article that was printed in a Japan newspaper that was translated for me, and I'm just going to read a few of the pertinent highlights. Uchaya Thermostat Company, hereafter called Uchaya, is a manufacturer in Saitama, Japan, which specializes in developing and producing thermostats, thermal protectors, and thermal cutouts. In July 2006, Uchaya came to know that counterfeits of its thermal protectors were supplied to one of end product manufacturers. While giving a serious thought to this matter, Uchaya came up with an idea of utilizing the UL certification that the counterfeit product had. A few months later, with cooperation from UL, Uchaya succeeded to stop the production of the counterfeit products. The article then goes on about the attempt that Uchaya had initially to try and stop the counterfeiting on their own. After this proved unsuccessful, Uchaya had an idea. They focused their attention to the fact that the thermal protectors were certified by UL. Replicating products and applying fault markings are against the rules of UL certification program. The president speculated that it was UL's problem as well, and UL would take actions against it. He reported it to UL. UL always has stood firmly against counterfeiting. UL is launching a comprehensive set of initiatives designed to detect and stop the counterfeits. UL often works with government agencies such as Customs. In North America, it has resulted in significant seizures of product and criminal prosecution of both companies and individuals responsible for counterfeiting the UL mark. In this case, too, UL's anti-counterfeit team soon started to communicate with Uchaya to share the details. Quote, I brought this issue to other certification bodies, but UL is the only one who took action. We wanted to search the factory, but we felt it dangerous to do it all by ourselves. I was so glad and relieved when I knew that UL inspectors visited the factory, found the imitation products, warned the manufacturer. UL has local inspectors who have technical knowledge and familiarity with local situations and laws. The success owes to their unflinching actions. The loss of UL certifications will deal a crashing blow to the manufacturers who export their products to the United States. We are very grateful for UL to exercise its authority for our products. UL will continue to demonstrate strong determination against the counterfeits and work to safeguard integrity of the UL mark, as it knows that such efforts will lead to safeguard of integrity of clients' products. So I'll leave you with that, and hopefully you'll stick around and have some questions for us at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Bob. Most insightful and to the point, and hopefully we're starting to build a case for electrical contractors to take a lot more seriously the scope and the impact of this crime against all portions of our industry. And talking about cases, our next speaker is Steve Litchfield. Steve is Assistant General Counsel for Schneider Square D, and has been very proactive and active and successful in litigating specific cases, and we hope that Steve will bring another dimension to this. People are getting sued, and people are getting committed, and Steve will give us a few minutes to hopefully elaborate on that and the steps and efforts that Schneider Square D is taking to fight this crime. Steve?
Thank you, John. Can you hear me all right? All right. Again, I'm Steve Litchfield, in-house counsel for Square D Company. I've been with the company for 27 years, and when I started with Square D in 1981, we had some evidence of counterfeit products at Square D. But back in 1981, the counterfeits that I saw were laughable. They were usually our QO circuit breakers, which are what we're finding as counterfeit product now. But back then, our brand is a D in a square, where they would have a C in a square, or the D would be backwards, or the things would rattle when you pick them up. And you couldn't imagine any contractor in their right mind installing something like that and expecting it to work. I think they were primarily intended back then for the overseas market, for other countries where the standards weren't as high as here as in the United States. But on occasion, we would see them. They came mainly out of Thailand and mainly out of Mexico. Well, fast forward to 2004, which is when we had an experience with I'll call them a wholesaler or an unauthorized distributor of electrical equipment. Square D, as Siemens, sells through authorized distributors. We have a contractual relationship with a set of distributors that we sell our products to. There's also a group out there that are unauthorized distributors, or basically wholesalers. These wholesalers gain our products through a variety of ways, through overstocking for distributors that are getting rid of inventory, for project job overruns, but they will get their product in a variety of ways. We had a distributor that was out east that was advertising very low prices, that was an unauthorized distributor back in 2004. And we went to investigate and did a clandestine buy to see where these products were coming from, to see if we could find some product numbers that might indicate where they were made or where they were shipped to. And we were surprised to see that over half of those products that we bought in that clandestine buy were counterfeit. Well, shortly after that, we filed suit against this wholesaler for violating a variety of laws, including the Lanham Act, for selling counterfeit products. We used that lawsuit and the discovery process that's inherent in litigation to find out who he bought products from and who they sold them to. And then we sued those guys at both ends of the chain. And then we used the discovery process in those lawsuits to find out who they bought from and who they sold to. And we sued them too. And the long and short of all this is from 2004 until now, Square D Company has filed over 13 lawsuits against sellers of counterfeits here in the United States, naming over 40 defendants in these lawsuits. We've settled a number of these cases, and when we settle them, we require the defendant to notify the Consumer Product Safety Commission that they've been selling a counterfeit product. And if you know anything about the Consumer Product Safety Commission, they get involved to help you recall products. So these distributors, unauthorized distributors that have been selling counterfeit products that we've sued and settled with, have now had to do recalls, meaning going to their contractors and their customers and letting them know that they have sold them counterfeit QO circuit breakers and that they have to go out to wherever they've installed them and try to get them back. Not a good situation to be in, particularly since comparing the 1981 circuit breaker that I saw to the 2004 counterfeit circuit breaker, the 2004 ones are virtually indistinguishable from the real ones on the exterior. You can't tell the difference, and once they're installed, I don't know how you're going to get them back other than to take everything out, which is what these people have to do. So to talk about what that does to the goodwill of your business, if you're a wholesaler or a distributor or a contractor that's installed products like this, that's a very, very difficult position to be in. The circuit breakers that we've found are mostly coming from China, and we did some tests to compare them to the real circuit breakers. And just briefly, what we found is the counterfeit QO circuit breaker from China has a 3200 amp short circuit rating instead of the normal 10,000 amp. The contacts weld due to improper materials. There's erratic tripping and no calibration. The flexible connector inside the circuit breaker is frayed and fails. There's no temperature compensation. The magnetic trip is inoperable, and it doesn't meet UL standards or pretty much any other standard for that matter. UL has tested some of these counterfeit circuit breakers, And in one of their tests, there's a famous picture that's going around. I don't know if any of you or all of you have seen it, but it is a photograph of the circuit breaker receiving a short circuit with the shutter being snapped the instant the breaker gets the short circuit. There's a tremendous explosion when this happens. And at UL, if I'm quoting this correctly, Bob, they measured the force of the blast, and it was enough to throw a 200-pound man 10 feet across a room. Molten metal sprayed across the room, and there was a tremendous fire hazard. So that's one thing that happens with counterfeit circuit breakers when you have them in your home. And I'll submit if that happens, you're lucky. Because the other thing that happens is nothing. You have a condition in your home somewhere else where it's dangerous, and your circuit breaker would normally trip and protect your house from that dangerous situation. These counterfeit breakers won't trip, or they'll trip much more slowly than a genuine product. So there's a high-risk situation. These are clearly dangerous products that are being installed into homes. Through our lawsuits and this kind of spider web, if you will, of connections that we've developed through suing all of these different entities, we're starting to see some of the same names pop up. And one of the companies that we sued in Indiana that was dealing directly with the Chinese we're finding that they're advertising directly to these companies, and they're representing themselves as Square D Company. One company that we found in China is by the name of Sunghong Electric. It's in the Jiangxi province in China, and I mention them because we conducted a raid on this company last year. In cooperation with the Chinese authorities, we raided Sunghong Electric. On the day of the raid, we found 19,000 miniature circuit breakers. 10,000 were Schneider's, 9,000 were other manufacturers. So it isn't just a Schneider Square D issue, it's an industry-wide issue, as Kevin has said. We found 300,000 labels and packaging, and it appeared that those 19,000 circuit breakers were 1 or 2 days production of this plant. It was estimated that this one plant, Sunghong Electric, was geared up to manufacture over 3 million miniature circuit breakers a year. And they had been in business since 2004. So just for fun, let's assume they ran at capacity for those 3 years. That's 9 million circuit breakers destined only for North America. That's the size of the problem, and by the way, that's just one manufacturer. We hired investigators in China to do a market study, it's called, to see how many companies were advertising to sell Square D. That first pass market study found 7 companies, of which Sunghong Electric was one. So that gives you an idea of the potential volume of product that is being imported into this country in terms of circuit breakers. So Square D, through its efforts, has kept or seized 500,000 circuit breakers in these last 3.5, 4 years that we've been fighting this fight. We've had another 225,000 subject to recall through the CPSC. So that's roughly what, 750,000 breakers that we know of. We've done some math, and the dimensions of a QO circuit breaker, if you take that and then compare it to the dimensions of a standard 40-foot shipping container, you can fit about 250,000 of those in a standard 40-foot shipping container coming over from China. So we've captured about 2.5 shipping containers in 3.5 years. So it gives you an idea of just how difficult it is to get these. So what do? I'm going to echo the advice from Siemens, which is very good advice, and if he didn't say it, I was going to say it first. Buy from an authorized distributor. Our channel is clean. When you buy from an authorized Square D distributor, you're virtually assured of getting a genuine product. Counterfeits leak into the channel through the unauthorized distributors or through the wholesalers or through companies that are not buying with a straight relationship from the manufacturer. They're buying on price. They're trying to get their products from wherever they can based on the lowest price. And that's how counterfeits get into these locations and then get resold. So I don't know if it's worth it to save a few bucks to buy from someone that you don't know where the products came from. If it was me, I wouldn't do it. I would buy from an authorized distributor, making sure that I know I'm getting a genuine Square D product, or for that matter, a genuine electrical product that's coming from one of the authorized or original manufacturers. And I want to reemphasize, this isn't just a Square D problem. This isn't just Square D QO circuit breakers that are being counterfeited. Square D is putting forth, I think, a pretty valiant effort and a lot of money into fighting counterfeits. And to me, there's no brand loyalty among counterfeiters. Counterfeiters are like water running down a hill. They're going to seek the path of least resistance. And those companies, I think, that put up a big fight, the counterfeiters are going to shift to the ones that don't. So this is an industry problem, and I think the industry has to hold together to make the effort to fight against counterfeits. Square D is committed and intends to continue to do this, and we're going forward with our activities. Thank you very much.
Steve, thank you very much. You heard it from the people who have actually done it, who are stopping it, who are working to stop it. Our final panelist this afternoon is Bill Ferguson, who is Vice President of Administration, General Counsel, Secretary for Babcock Electric Power. Prior to that, he was a practicing attorney specializing in construction law, government law in those areas. And as I mentioned previously, for those of you who are contractors out there, he is one. So, Bill, let you talk a little bit more, from a legal and contractor's perspective.
Thank you, John, and thank Electrical Contractor Magazine. I'd like to thank the National Electrical Contractors Association. I've been to many conventions over the years, and I'll have to tell you, every time I come, they seem to get better and better. So hats off to Dan Walter and his team. I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves while you've been here. I certainly have. It's been a remarkable program, and as I understand it, attendance this year exceeded all expectations, over 3,000 attendees, and so congratulations to NECA and its members. I'd also like to thank TED Magazine for giving me the opportunity to participate in the panel. I had an opportunity to meet Mike Martin earlier today, and Mike, thank you very much. You heard John allude to the fact that I'm a former contractor. I'm presently with Babcock Power. And some of you may not be familiar with the company. Maybe all of you are not familiar with the company. We're a holding company. We have a number of U.S. subsidiaries. One is Vote Power International in Louisville, Kentucky. Another subsidiary is Thermal Engineering International USA in Santa Fe Springs, California. We have Boiler Tube Company of America in South Carolina. We have Riley Power in Massachusetts. What we do is we're an original equipment manufacturer. We manufacture equipment components for the power industry. They're not truly electrical related. We sell to independent power producers and we sell to utilities. But we're an original equipment manufacturer nonetheless. So we have to deal with these same issues, and we have to be diligent when we are designing and manufacturing our own custom equipment to make sure that the components that we're purchasing are not knockoffs, they're not fakes, they don't come from a foreign producer who is using someone else's trade name and passing a product off that's not genuine. My background before Babcock Power was I was with Raytheon Engineers and Constructors. Some of you may have heard of that company. It was sold to the Washington Group. I was the general counsel. We had 55 subsidiaries, and we did work on an international scale, over 68 countries at last count. So we had to deal with installations both domestic and foreign. Before that, I was a NECA contractor. I'm the son of an electrical contractor, and I spent my early years from the age of 16 working on electrical construction sites, as most guys do, until my late 20s before I decided to become a lawyer. So I know what you have to deal with day to day. It's a complicated business. It's got a lot more complicated since I left it. And when I sat down and started to prepare for this discussion, I asked myself, I had to dial back a little bit and put my son of an electrical contractor's hat on, and I had to ask myself, what's important? What's my takeaway? And I jotted down three things. I wrote down safety, I wrote down reputation, and the last thing I wrote down was survival. And survival meaning that if you get drawn into a lawsuit where there's substantial personal injury or property damage, it's going to be a case of survival in large part for your company. Are you going to be able to get out without having to pay a large sum of damages? One point that hasn't been made, or if it's been made, I'd like to emphasize it, and that is that the manufacturers that you see here, they are in the business of protecting their good name and their reputation. Their trade names, their trademarks, and their reputations have been built over a period of many years with thousands and thousands of loyal people to back their products. However, if a counterfeiter sends a product into the United States and you purchase it and you install it in a building and that results in a fire or worse, a catastrophe with his loss of life, these manufacturers are not going to be liable. They will not be liable because they didn't manufacture the product. They may get sued initially if people don't know, but all they'll have to show is that's not my product. That was manufactured overseas and it's fraudulent. And once they are able to show that, they're out of the lawsuit. But you know who stays in? You all stay in. Everybody that purchased that product and or installed that product is going to stay in the lawsuit. So safety is a number one issue. Reputation is an issue. Survival is another key issue. And when you get sued, what happens is that everybody that's in that realm of the touches, I would like to say, touched the product, installed the product, is going to get named. You'll be sued for breach of contract by the party you had your contract with. You'll be sued for negligence. You'll be sued for gross negligence. You'll be sued for intentional misrepresentation, installing a product that you knew. You'll have to prove you didn't know, but they'll claim you knew that it was wrong and you put it in anyway. You might be sued in strict liability and tort, which means they'll be claiming that you put a product that was unreasonably dangerous into the marketplace or installed it in a building, and you're derivatively liable. You could be sued for fraud. Many states have what is known as Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Acts. You could be sued under one or more of those acts, depending upon how you brought the product into the United States, what your role was, where it was installed. Many of those acts provide for punitive damages, sometimes treble damages and attorney's fees. And ultimately, if someone in your organization, someone in responsible charge, actually conspired to bring the product into the United States and installed it, even if you, the owner of the company, didn't know, but if they happen to be a vice president or an officer or someone who would have responsibility for how your business is run, there could be criminal liability. And we heard reference to criminal liability earlier today. It's not a slap on the wrist in the United States, and unfortunately in most foreign countries, including China, it is a slap on the wrist. In the United States, first offense, up to 10 years in prison, $5 million in fines for the individual, and $10 million in fines for the company. Second offense, 20 years in prison, 10 and 15. So it's a lot of money, there's a lot at stake, and these manufacturers, the legitimate manufacturers, all they have to do is show it wasn't their equipment and they're off the hook and you're there. Well, how do you avoid liability? Some years ago, it's about 100 years ago now, Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "The law is a seamless web." That sounds nice. It sounds like everything is fair, and as you go around between this law of breach of contract and negligence and intentional wrongdoing and fraud, that at the end of the day, the good guy gets to walk. I'd like to tell you that that's what happens in the real world, but it's not what happens. Because in this instance, the party that's ultimately responsible, who really should pay the freight, is the fraudulent manufacturer, the knockoff artist in China or elsewhere. They're the counterfeit producers, and they're the ones that can't be reached. They're the empty pockets. You can't get into the countries. If you can get into the countries, they run under the cover of darkness. They'll be shut down in one location. They'll set up in another location. So what's left in our American justice system is you and your co-defendants. Now, what happens if there are no co-defendants? It's going to be the plaintiff's job, the plaintiff's lawyer's job, to show that you bear some responsibility, that you're not just a pure innocent. They will argue, for example, that you knew or should have known that this counterfeit product was fraudulent, that it wasn't genuine. They'll look at the label, they'll look at all different components of it, they'll bring expert testimony to bear, and if you're found even 1% responsible, in many jurisdictions in this country, in fact, it's the majority of jurisdictions, there's what's known as joint and several liability, and although you're 1% responsible, if there's a row of empty seats beside you, you will pay 100% of the damages. And that's the risk, that's what we're faced with. So there needs to be a team effort to defend against this type of wrongdoing. It's a crime, it's growing, it's getting worse, it's not getting better. The U.S. government has stepped up. There's been recent legislation known as the Stop Counterfeiting and Manufacturing Good Act that was signed into law in 2006 by President Bush. But it's just the beginning. You need to be diligent. I would recommend, among other things, that an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. Be aware, train your people, train your apprentices, ask your project managers to be aware of what's being picked up at the local supplier's office, have them do a quick look-see and make sure that what they're receiving is genuine. If they are, by and large, you'll be protected. If not, you're at your own risk. Thank you, John.
This is not just a manufacturer. This is not just a distributor. This is not another supplier's issue. This is our issue. And if we ignore it and we don't pay any attention to it, or we say, hey, I bought it legally, I installed it properly, I'm in the clear, hopefully what these four gentlemen have had to say today will cause you to go back and take another look. Before we go to Q&A, and we'll try to get you out of here very soon, I have one for any one of the panelists. We called this the Anti-Counterfeit or Electrical Product Counterfeit Initiative. Counterfeit is the overriding word that seems to define the issue. One of the areas that we are learning and will be addressing in both of our webinars, certainly in our printed supplement in December, is what are the other names and what are some of the other conditions? We've heard things like mislabeling. Could someone either address that, and maybe some of the names of some of the other tentacles, you strip them away, they're still counterfeiting. But sometimes they're called, my understanding is in the cable industry, there's a term called mislabeling. It's just as serious, just as onerous, and just as liable producing, I think, for an awful lot of people. So somebody...
I can take that. We've seen instances, not in our miniature circuit breakers, but in our larger molded case or switchgear, where it's original product, but it's used and it's been reconditioned. And the counterfeit piece is the label that the reconditioner goes out and prints at Kinko's or off his desktop computer. And oftentimes that label by itself is a counterfeit because they're using our trademarks without our permission. But also, it misrepresents the characteristics of that piece of equipment, usually making it look like it's a higher rated piece than it is. So reconditioned equipment you need to be careful with that as well and make sure it's coming from a good source that's qualified and not going to do things like that.
Good. Another term we hear thrown around, gray market. It's another part of this web. A brief comment, description, because we're going to hear all these words, and you're going to be hearing an awful lot more about this in the coming months and years. So, gray market, anybody take a stab?
Yeah, I'll be glad to address that one, John. I think they're actually very similar, but still somewhat exclusive. The gray market refers to, from our standpoint, an opinion where you do have legitimate product, it's just not making its way through authorized distribution channels. And I would say that anybody that is likely to participate in gray market type of activity should also be a target for somebody who might participate in illegal counterfeiting activity. So very similar in nature. A lot of times you may find the same folks involved, but not exactly the same issue.
But all related.
But related.
Second cousins by marriage.
Yes.
Okay, we promised you an hour session. One quick closing remark, and I'm sure the panel is willing and ready to take a few Q&As. I just want to alert you, those of you who aren't here, or those of you of your companies who are not here, this particular panel discussion has been taped. Audio, video will appear on, as soon as it's edited, will appear on the websites of TED Magazine, of Electrical Contractor, of Siemens, on Square D, on UL, on NAED, that is TED Magazine, on NEMA, and numerous other, each of our other sponsors' websites. We are preparing in the meantime a microsite for anti-counterfeiting that will be its own entity that is an ongoing for archives, for white papers and ongoing things. So if someone, for those who did not attend today, this is not going to go away, neither are we. So I appreciate all of your attendance. Do we have any Q&A, any questions for the panel? It's going to be unusual to get four people like this with the breadth and depth of experience in this industry, particularly on this subject. So if you've got some questions, shout them out, please. Nikki.
Counterfeiting is getting so sophisticated. How are these products ending up on the retail shelves? I mean, how are they getting into the country when you've got patrols on the border or you're educating border people, but they're still coming in mass quantities?
I'm sure all of us up here have a company website. I certainly invite you to go to the UL website, which is just ul.com. You can remember /ACE, that's Anti-Counterfeiting Enforcement. A lot more information than we're even giving you today. Information about our law enforcement, about our events, about our prosecutions, about our holographic labels. And again, I'm sure all the companies have a website. And if you can't remember ul.com /ACE, just ul.com and type in counterfeit. To answer your question, yes, counterfeit products are going to get in through the borders when you realize that the amount of containers that come in every day. Let's just take, for example, the Port of Los Angeles. It's 14,000 containers a day that come into that port. That's one port alone. Certainly they don't inspect every product that comes in. They examine everything through a manifest. They see where it's coming from, what importer. They have databases to show what importers, distributors they might have trouble with in the past. As buyers, consumers, and I think it was mentioned by Stephen perhaps that if you deal with reputable wholesalers, retailers, if you go to the reputable stores that do know where their product is coming from, you're less likely to find a counterfeit product. It's when you buy through the internet unknown sites, when you go to flea markets, when you go to deep discount locations, when the price is too good to be true, when the packaging doesn't have a company name, or it does have a company name but no address information, a lot of typographical errors. Sometimes you just have to be aware of who you're buying from and what the product looks like.
To bring home the importance of this as an industry issue, I can think of no more appropriate signal that this goes beyond any kind of barriers. And I think there's a message here for electrical contractors to continue to, and especially to learn more, to join in. The last I heard, Siemens and Square D occasionally compete with one another. And they compete hard, they compete well. They're both on this stage today. They have both put their money where the mouth is to gather, to join in on this industry-wide fight where if we don't win, everybody loses. So this goes way beyond boundaries. This goes beyond any competitive issues. And this is one of the reasons why this initiative is so tremendously important. If we can get major competitors talking about the same area, think what we can do if we can get electrical contractors talking to one another, talking to manufacturers, listening, reading, and studying so that sooner or later we don't have to have a panel like this. That's our job, and that's our challenge. So I just want to thank each of you for taking the time to educate many of us in areas that we're always not that familiar. Look for this on our websites. Look for the December supplements in both TED Magazine and Electrical Contractor, and an ongoing expansion of information that will make you aware and help you learn how to deal when you do encounter these issues, what to do about it, and who to call. So again, thank you guys. We can say thank you all for taking some time. That's it. Bye.